And happy last day of Black Hat to everyone who made it. Sincere appreciation, Caleb and Justine. I'm so glad you guys are hosting this summit, so thank you very much. Entrepreneurship is really, really critical to this industry, and it's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. And throughout this week, it's special to have so much of the security startup community together in one place. So I'm Jon Oberheide, no longer affiliated with Duo and Cisco, left about a year ago, but just wanted to tell a little bit of the story behind Duo. I started in the early 2000s doing security research, writing exploits, giving Black Hat talks. In the 2010s, I decided to atone for my sins of offense and wanted to build a security company on the defensive side. So we founded Duo, myself and Doug Song, my co-founder, back in 2009, and spent 12 years building that business. And nowadays, in the 2020s, in a post-Duo world, I'm trying to give back by helping other founders and companies scale their businesses, and apparently back to giving Black Hat talks. So it's all full circle. So what we're going to do today, we're going to cram about 12 years of experience building Duo in 30, 40 minutes. Hopefully be able to share some learnings that you can apply to your company that you're building, or maybe you're in the audience and you're thinking about building a company down the road. And we'll leave a little time for Q&A, hopefully. We do have lunch after this, so I think we can go over a little bit. And always happy to talk to folks after the talk in the hallway as well. Big disclaimer up front. Startup advice is notorious for suffering from survivorship bias. Just because something worked for me or worked for Duo does not mean it's going to work for you or your company. I have worked with a variety of cybersecurity companies, but I'm mostly speaking from the book of Duo for this presentation, so just take all this in with that context. So first, want to share a little bit of context on Duo. I don't know, Justine, if we should receive accolades for forcing strong authentication onto the masses. We tried to make it a little bit easier and less painful, so that hopefully gets us some credit. And then we can jump into some of the lessons learned. So our mission statement at Duo was to democratize security by making it easy and effective. And maybe that strikes you as kind of corny or stereotypical. Every startup is democratizing something. You're all trying to bring your technology or product to the masses. But we really believe that this was needed in the security space. As an industry, we are really great at building and designing products for the 1%. We're building products for JP Morgan Chase that spends $500 million a year on cybersecurity. And we build really advanced lead capabilities, but we don't think about the IT person at the SMB organization who has to operationalize this product and who has no security expertise and is wearing 20 different hats at their organization. So we're a $120 billion industry that is somewhat notorious for not being easy and not always being effective, not always solving the problems that we are out there claiming. So that mission statement was a little more pointed and less generic than maybe it sounded on the covers. From a product perspective at Duo, we're most known for our multi-factor authentication. A key innovation we had in the early days was that you can push a green button on your phone to log in. This was not rocket surgery, but it was revolutionary at the time with the advent of these modern mobile devices. But this experience, this Duo push experience, was really just a single manifestation of how we thought about our product experience. We were building security for humans, not for networks or endpoints or servers. So everything we did was around ease of use, ease of management, or ease of deployment. Because the challenge with strong authentication was not that it was the right solution to phishing and account takeover, but the real problem was the inability to deploy MFA at any sensible sort of usability profile or any sensible scale to the masses. So that is kind of the subset of the problem space that we focused on. Later on, in the later years, became a leader in what we now call zero trust, or like a beyond core security architecture, but whatever kind of buzzword labels you want to apply, we just wanted to make it really easy for users to access their corporate applications. And we had a lot of commercial success doing so. We had a really diverse go-to-market. We started down-market in SMB and grew up over time. This was critical to our mission of democratizing security, bringing it to organizations that were kind of at or below the security poverty line. They couldn't even afford to protect themselves. And allowed us to build a really unique, high-growth, and yet highly efficient business. And a lot of what we did well, we copied. We copied from the trends of kind of the consumerization of IT applied to security products. We were doing things that are in the vein of PLG, before PLG was its own name. We had transparent pricing on our website. You could kick the tires and try the product and use it for free as long as you wanted. You didn't have to talk to a sales rep if you thought the product met your needs, and you could swipe a credit card. These were all just basic things that we thought how software should be sold applied to an industry that just hadn't done that before. And that resulted in some pretty rapid growth. We did a T3, D2, which means we tripled 3 times and doubled twice, going from 1 million to 3 to 10 to 30 to 70 to 130 on a yearly basis. So pretty crazy growth rate. And so the business grew to over 100 million. We had about 20,000 customers, about 700 employees in 2018. Considered the public markets, got pretty far down the IPO path before Cisco came along and took us off that track with a pretty good offer. So it's a great outcome for our team, our investors, one of the top multiples paid ever in software. But more importantly, it was the right long-term home for the business and team. And it's continued to thrive within Cisco, crossed 500 million ARR on the way to $1 billion. But the most important metric was not the financial outcome, but our customer success. We had a Net Promoter Score, NPS, of over 70 consistently throughout the company. We had another kind of corny slogan of the most loved company in security. But it was the true voice of our users and customers that would come to us, stop us on the street, and tell us how much they love the product or love the company, which is just truly bizarre to have end users use the love word when they're talking about security technology that they're interacting with. Also, our eNPS, our employee NPS, was consistently in that same range. And as Dave Duffield of Workday always said, if you have happy employees, you have happy customers. And so, honestly, in hindsight, it's that team and the culture that you build that endures beyond any particular product line or any sort of corporate entity. So hopefully that gives you a quick kind of highlights of Duo over 12 years. And now we can jump into some of the lessons that can hopefully be applied to the companies that you guys are building or considering building. So I think of company building in kind of 3 distinct phases. You have your startup phase, you have your growth phase, and your scale phase. I'm going to borrow from my co-founder Doug's analogy. You have your punk rock band, you have your jazz band, and then you have your marching band, kind of in levels of maturity. And these aren't truly distinct phases. It's more of a continuum, but it's one way to kind of think about the business in orders of magnitude. So your startup phase is that's 0 to 1, where your job really, your focus for that stage is build a product. You're going from nothing to hopefully some sort of product market fit. And it's not just founder-led sales, it's founder-led everything. The growth stage is kind of that 1 to 10 million ARR range, where your core focus is now building a business, building the early form of what a business and financial model, go-to-market, distribution can look like. And then the scale phase is when you're going from 10 to 100 million, where really your main job as a founder is to build an organization. And we'll walk a little bit through these different phases, share a couple key learnings from each. And folks in the audience, maybe you're in different phases here, but maybe you can draw some learnings from wherever you might be. So first, startup. You're just starting a company, or you're in the early stages. That's great. Where do you get started? What should you build? How do you start off? The first thing is timing. And I think it goes without saying you can't time the market. There's no bad time to start a company, but I would argue that there are good times. And honestly, right now is a pretty good time to start a company. We started Duo in 2009, which was right out of the Great Recession. And it might be a little counterintuitive, but a recession, a downturn, some belt tightening from your customer base is actually a really good time to start a business. And why? Like, why does that sort of counterintuitive statement make sense? Well, the death knell of many early stage startups is getting false signal from your customers or from the market. So when times are really frothy and everyone's buying, everyone's budgets are increasing, you can get a lot of false signal from those early customers. They might be doing a lot of paid pilots. They might be doing a lot of experiments. They're throwing money around. And you start to think that you've built something really important because you have 5 paid pilots with big enterprise customers. But when budgets are tight, it really forces you to kind of hone your product value. It makes you ensure that you're really delivering true value, that you're delivering painkillers instead of vitamins. And right now is a time with raising interest rates that companies have tightened their belts a little bit, which is a great thing, again, if you're starting off. And it doesn't mean that you can't be successful in the frothy times, maybe of the past few years, but it just requires a lot more focus and diligence to make sure you're building right value and you're not getting glare from sort of the macroeconomic conditions. And that focus just happens organically when times are tight. Next up is what to build. How do you decide what you're going to go after, what problem, what market space? And you should be aware of what kind of founder you are when you're starting the company. I would encourage you to be a customer out founder, and I'll explain that in a bit here. Maybe the highest risk sort of founder prototype is a tech out founder, meaning you start with tech and then you go out from there. So I have this great algorithm, I have this research I did, I have this great technique, I have a prototype, and I want to go find a commercial opportunity for it. That is not usually a recipe for success. You've got a hammer and you're looking for nails, like not the kind of prototype of how you want to start off. The next sort of archetype is a problem out founder. Like, I have this problem that I want to tackle. I observed it or experienced it myself, and it seems worth building a company around. I guess it's better. It's good. You at least had that problem yourself, and there's at least one customer that you know of, and you're getting warmer in terms of kind of the ideal setup. But kind of being customer out means you're going and you're doing your customer discovery before you actually decide what to build. And you're not deciding what to build and then going and validating that with customers and trying to hunt for customers that might have that problem. And it doesn't always work out that way. It doesn't always come to this sort of idealized state. Sometimes you come across a problem in your current job, and you're like, I just feel so compelled to go tackle this for every other company. And that's fine, but you also can't skip that customer research. You can't, no matter how passionate you are about the problem, you still have to start with the fundamentals of validation. So the founding story of Duo is that we were customer out. We had no idea what we wanted to build as a company. Doug and I started the company in 2009, and we said, we want to build the next great security company. So we started with a completely blank slate. And this here is our original brainstorming doc from 2009. You can see we explored a ton of security ideas, and even some non-security ideas as well. This was 2009, so there's a lot of cloud in there, cloud WAF, cloud security, cloud storage, cloud firewall, web filter. There's also some non-security stuff in there, like a commercial Google Wave implementation, which sounds terrible. But if you notice what's missing here, there's no MFA. Like, we didn't start off and say, like, we want to build MFA. Like, what a boring space. That's the last thing we wanted to do. But we were so compelled from talking to customers in those early conversations that it was the thing we had to do. Everyone was getting phished, especially kind of down-market organizations. And, they simply could not deploy more RSA secure ID tokens. It was this problem of access and consumption of strong authentication, not that it wasn't the right solution to the problem of password theft and ATO. And we knew this to be true, but we just kind of had to get over our own egos and say, like, this is the problem to solve, and we think along the way we'll come up with a better idea to do it. Now, funny enough, in hindsight, all of these other ideas were actually pretty good. Maybe maybe we should have built the commercial Google Wave implementation. Maybe we would have had more fun building Slack instead of Duo. But it goes to show you that ideas are super cheap, and execution is what really matters. Next lesson is don't fight physics. There's a lot of natural physics and gravitational forces of the market, quote unquote. By choosing what you want to build and what problem you're setting out to solve, you're making a conscious or unconscious decision of whether you're going to fight those market forces or you're going to use them to your advantage. So let's presuppose that you want to build a big company. There's no rule that has to be your ambition. We're just going to assume that. And you want to have a billion-dollar outcome. If you look at the data, this is billion-dollar M&A IPOs over the past decade. And you look at kind of my applied labels on top of some of those logos, how many are a brand new category? Not a lot, or really any. And how many are next gen whatever, next gen AV, next gen endpoint, next gen firewall, next gen identity or SSO? A lot of them. These are the well-established and large market areas. And if trying to create a new category is near impossible. Startups are already so risky. Why make it even harder on yourself? When you look at, to take a little Gartner view of the market, it's endpoint, network, identity, cloud. That's the vast majority of the market. And if you want to go into every customer conversation, you have two choices. In that customer conversation, you can be selling into an existing budgeted project, or you can be scrapping to try to create new budget and new urgency to buy in that customer. And you definitely want to do the former and not the latter. It's better to spend your time figuring out how you're going to disrupt an existing market before trying to invent a new one. Now, that might not be the most exciting or compelling or next gen whatever is kind of lame and boring. But you need to live off the land. You need to live off the land of the current market opportunity in your Act 1 while you take the time to construct your crazy spaceship to Mars. And that was our strategy at Duo. We could sell MFA like hotcakes. It's the oldest product category in security. Our closest competitor of RSA, the product was invented in 1985. It was literally a 30-year-old product, oldest category. And it took us a while to build that more ambitious Act 2 and Act 3 of a zero trust strategy, and it took a while for the market to kind of come around to that. So what can you look for instead? What are the market forces that can help you instead of hurt you? And these are some of the things that I look for when I'm now on the other side evaluating companies from an investment perspective. One, I like companies that address big, boring, broad markets, not niche market opportunities. I love companies that go beyond just the Fortune 500 as well, that are selling to a broader base of IT and security buyers. And that kind of maps to my own experience. Duo was half SMB and mid-market and half enterprise. Another thing to look for is kind of rapidly changing technological capabilities or requirements for your customer. If you can leverage some of those kind of outside macro trends that might change the game for your product space, it's a huge tailwind. At Duo in 2009, 2010, it was when cloud and mobile was really taking off. Organizations were adopting cloud services, and their employees were bringing mobile devices into work. And that created new requirements that the existing solutions in the market could not address, but that we could solve as a newer, more nimble company. And it's also how we delivered our service. It was a cloud-delivered service leveraging your mobile device for authentication. So we had a little bit of a double whammy kind of riding the wave of cloud and mobile. The third point, I think kind of follows from the first two of find a large incumbent that has a lot of market share to go take, but with a bad NPS. Having an incumbent that customers hate is the easiest path to revenue. And that was RSA for us. If you can replace existing customer spend with a better, easier experience, that's the story of so many successful startups out there. And lastly, in security, you need strong regulatory and compliance drivers. Half of the security spend out there is driven by compliance. So another way to put that is you have to be a must-have versus nice-to-have. You have to be the painkillers versus the vitamins. When you're talking to a CISO, is your project on his list of the top 5 things he needs to get done this year? Or is it one of those priorities that can maybe push off to next year and not get fully budgeted? So these are some of the things to think about as you're founding a company, maybe as you're positioning your existing company, or if you already have a business, like thinking about what you might build next on the roadmap. And like these physics exist, so it's just a matter of if you want to fight them or use them to your advantage. So moving to growth, you've picked the right problem, you've picked the right market, you've built an MVP, you've scrapped together $1 million in ARR, you feel like you have some sort of product market fit, and now you're moving to growth. And again, your core focus here is building a business. You're building go-to-market, you're building distribution, and you're building some of your early team. So maybe you have built a really customer-oriented product. You were a customer-out founder, and you've got this really incredible experience in the product. You've done deep customer research. You have great design partners. You're hand-holding deployments. You've PLG'd fully out the wazoo. But if you're only designing your product around the customer experience, you're kind of missing the boat. As you build out more of your new corporate functions in the growth phase, you have to think about the customer's journey across the entire company, not just in your product. It's really easy to hire a sales leader and say, hey, we built this widget, go sell it. Or hire a marketing leader and say, hey, we've got this widget, go market it. Or hire CS and say, OK, go deploy and support this widget. But you might start to lose sight of that full customer journey. Like, how does the customer lifecycle map across your entire organization, all these new touch points that you built? So this is an example from Duo. It was actually a slide from our Series B pitch deck, but it's how we thought about the customer lifecycle in these different touch points. How a new prospect would find us, try the product, how we'd sell to them, how they'd buy, how they'd grow, and how they'd stay with us. And we strive for excellence in each of these sort of touch points, not just having a really great trial experience or great product experience out of the box. And you can think of things even like your legal team and your contracting process. Like, is your legal team thinking about the customer's experience as they go from sales to contracts to a signed deal to deployment? And how can you make that less painful for your customers? I like using the legal team as an example because it's probably the last thing people think of. But we had a great example of that at Duo. There was a period of time where in the Duo mobile app, we had an end-user license agreement. So you're an end user of Duo, you install the app, and you get this nonsense 30-page EULA that you need to click through. And not all of our users are like knowledge workers or understand this stuff. And it's created a lot of friction with those new users. If it creates friction for users, it created friction for those customers. And it was our legal team that said, let's remove this. Like, one, it's creating friction for our customers. Two, this click wrap EULA stuff isn't actually enforceable in any courts. And we just want to create a better end user experience. So that idea to remove that from our apps came from our legal team as opposed to our product or UX. And I thought that was really unique. Like, how many legal teams are thinking about how can we improve the end user experience of our product? So you've invested a lot in the product, and you need to put that same level of care into the whole customer experience, like designing that experience and then building your business around the whole thing. Next, as you start to build distribution, you are building this broader functional team. You're building sales, you're building marketing, you're building CS, you're building finance, you're building a people team. It's not just founders and some engineers. It's not just an R&D team anymore. So now your talent strategy becomes much more important. And we had a talent strategy at Duo that was a little different than most. I'll caveat that with we were hiring out of Ann Arbor, Michigan in the early days, so we weren't necessarily going to find the most experienced SaaS and security folks. But we hired people first for their attitude. Are they positive? Are they have a growth mindset? Can they collaborate well with others? Can they operate in a fast-paced environment? And then their aptitude. You don't have to be the smartest person out there, but can you learn quickly? Maybe you never worked in SaaS before, maybe you never worked in security, but can you come up to speed and kind of be adaptable? And experience was honestly last. We didn't want people that came in with the existing playbook that they had run at a different company. We wanted people that would be more first principles oriented and figure out what would work for our business and customers. And experience can be great, but it certainly can't displace the first two there. And we especially wanted people that could draw the owl. This was our original onboarding slide for new hires way back in the day. And we wanted to find people that were self-starters, that maybe they had their ownership of their role, but they had a much broader sphere of influence in their organization. There wasn't any time where a person would say, no, that's not my job. Like, I see that ball dropping, and I'm not gonna catch it because it's not my job. We wanted to find people that could spot a problem or an opportunity. They could rally a bunch of folks to go solve it, and they could deliver. And those are the people that ended up being the most successful in kind of scaling with the company. Besides growing your business and your talent base, this is also the phase where you might make some really challenging, somewhat irreversible decisions around how you capitalize the company. And knowing where you want to take the company in the long term is really important in this stage. In the security space, there's kind of 3 distinct bands of M&A activity, of acquisitions. There's kind of like the tens of millions, like you sell for 40, 50 million, and there's a long list of buyers. Rapid7 can buy you, Tenable, Fortinet, Veracode. They can kind of tuck you into the product portfolio. So there's a pretty decent list of folks that can do deals in that range. The second band is really kind of like the hundreds, low hundreds of millions, like maybe like 250 to 500. And unfortunately, just because of how the security market is structured, that buyer list gets slimmer really quickly. Like Palo, Cisco, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Okta, Checkpoint, those are the buyers that now you can potentially sell your company to. But once you get to that third band, like the high hundreds of millions or billion plus, there are very, very few buyers that can write a check that big. And it really has to be like a perfect strategic fit for their portfolio. You might build an awesome company, but then it's like Cisco says, oh, I've already got one of those. Or Palo says, we're already doing something different in that stage. And suddenly you have like no buyers available. So there's these structural issues in the security market. And you want to be careful that you don't, you want to capitalize the company to maintain your optionality so you don't paint yourself into this corner. If you raise a growth equity round at a 600 million post valuation, like you have very few options going forward other than IPOing. If you raise a growth round at a 200 post, suddenly you have a lot more flexibility in potential outcomes for the company. And I tend to see a lot of founders that are trying to optimize for valuation, or they're trying to optimize for minimizing dilution. And in reality, like none of it really matters in the end. It's all kind of a rounding error. And we always tried to raise fairly responsible rounds at Duo. We probably could have pushed for higher valuations, but it didn't seem right. Like our seed round back in 2010, 2011 was a 1-on-4 post. We sold 25% of the company for $1 million. That seems crazy in the modern day, but that was somewhat normal back then. And guess what? We still built a great company and had a good outcome. So what really matters is that you're capitalizing the company for success and not pricing yourself out of any of those outcomes. OK, so moving to scale. So you've built a product, you've built some distribution, you've got some promising growth. You've got a financial model that shows that this is a real business. You've decided, hey, I want to take it the long haul and swing for the fences. Now this is the hard part. This is where you learn a lot about your true market opportunity. In reality, you can sell $1 million of anything. And you can sell $10 million of most things. But lots of companies kind of peter out after 10 million. You learn if you can make that jump from the early adopters to the early majority. And that's a really, really tough period. It's also a big change in how you operate. Like everything is now about scale. Like 10xing from 1 to 10 is very different from 10xing from 10 to 100. In some ways, it's maybe an exaggeration, but you kind of have to like throw everything else out that you did to get you from 0 to 10. You have that like scrappy entrepreneurial culture, like by any means necessary. And you really need to change that to more of controlled chaos. It's still going to be hectic and chaotic, but make the transition to professional management and leadership. And it's a period of intense change. And sometimes it feels like the wheels are coming off. And oftentimes it feels like the wheels are coming off. And sometimes you feel like this bus doesn't have any wheels. Like, what the hell are we doing? It was really easy to direct traffic when you had 20 people in a room. And now there's 100 people, and it's growing to 200, and it's growing to 400. And we have very inherent limitations as humans, like Dunbar's number or monkey's fear. Like, we just weren't made to operate in organizational environments like this. So what really is important in this phase is your cultural and organizational cohesion that needs to be strong to avoid kind of ripping yourself apart from these growth forces. And this is why culture matters so much for fast-growing companies. We had 3 cultural values at Duo: engineering the business. Like, when you're growing quickly, how can you iterate, release early and often? You can't go off for 3 months to design something and then come back because stuff has changed so much in the meantime. Learning together. We weren't smarter, bigger, better funded than our competitors, but we could learn faster. And not just individually, but how can we share those learnings broadly with our team so we can get a lot smarter together? And the last one, being kinder than necessary. Maybe that was a little bit of a Midwest thing, but it's also like good kindergarten skills. Like, how do you play well in the sandbox with each other? And when you're moving so fast, you can't have finger pointing. You can't have conflict. We would always ask our teams to assume positive intent when you're working with someone who's new at the company. You've probably never met them face to face, and yet you've got to now collaborate with them to get the job done. And these were the things that were kind of threefold. There were things that we thought were important based on our past professional experience. There were things that we thought we needed in our current business and our market, that they're actually tailored to not just platitudes that teamwork and integrity and whatever else, but they were important to the market that we were in, and also would set us up to be able to kind of scale through the hypergrowth phase without being torn apart. So how do you scale that culture? As a founder, you're only one person, and now you've got 200 other people that need to absorb these values, these principles, these stories from the past in the company, and osmosis doesn't really scale. And your cultural values and norms might be a little bit like below the waterline, like they're a little less visible, but above the waterline, you have the manifestation of those values through your behaviors, your rituals, your stories, what you decide to reward and recognize in your organization. And the first might be obvious, but you need to set the example as the founder. In some ways, as the company grows, your direct contributions end up mattering less. Like, it matters less what you do. You're just one person. You're not one of 10. You're one of 300. And how you do things matters more. Setting that example from the top of how teams should operate in the organization. And you can also teach those cultural values. You can teach internal empathy. You can teach customer empathy through stories. And I'll give you one example of a story that we told at Duo. So you guys all know the security industry is fraught with maybe some historically bad cultural sales and marketing practices. I often hear from founders, they're always asking, how can I avoid all of the bad practices, bad potholes in the history of the security industry? Like, as a founder, you might know it, but when you're hiring a bunch of reps, you're building a marketing program, like, how do you make sure people understand the right way to treat customers and treat your prospects? So the common example is like a breach happens to some company. It's out in the news. And your SDRs will hop on the phone and call that CISO and say, well, you should have brought our product. Like, let me tell you how our product can help you solve that breach that you had. Like, that's not helpful. No CISO wants a SDR out of college to tell them how they could have done their job better. So how do you train your sellers not to ambulance chase? How do you show your sellers and your marketers how you want to treat customers? So this was our Duo pizza play story, which was a real sales play that we ran. But it was also a good story to teach customer empathy. And we told the story in every new hire onboarding session that we had. So every single person in the company, when they came on board, got to hear the story and really absorbed it. So the story is a breach that happened. It was the New York Times had a breach. I don't remember the exact circumstance, but I think it was reported by a third party. It kind of showed up in the headlines before the New York Times really knew about it. And as you can imagine, everything was on fire at headquarters. Security team is doing incident response. The management team is doing investor relations, like multiple kinds of IRs going on. There's PR challenges. Like, it's chaos. And instead of calling them up and saying, hey, you really should have bought MFA, like that would have solved your problems, we thought, what can we do to be helpful in this situation? So what do? Of course, we sent them pizzas. We found out which office their security team was out of, and we sent them a big stack of pizzas and a box of 5-hour energy drink to fuel them through this situation. And sure enough, like the response was incredible from the team. I had multiple members of the security team that I knew there that reached out and basically said, this is the best thing that anyone in the world has ever done for us. And it's simple, it's small, it's trivial, it's cheap, but it was something that helped them in a time of crisis when every other security vendor was busy sending them emails and LinkedIn connections and calling them, trying to tell them how they could do their job better. And in our industry, we have like sales reps complaining that CISOs don't return their calls, and we have CISOs complaining that they hate all sales reps. Like maybe you figure out how you can genuinely help someone first. And that was one of our sales models, was help, ask. Like how can we help a customer or prospect multiple times before asking anything of them? And this was just one story, but when you're at your first week in a company and you hear this, it sticks with you more than probably any other tidbit of information that we're throwing at you. And as a rep or customer-facing role, you might never run the pizza play. You might not ever send pizza to a customer. But now you have a concrete example of how we want you to show up for customers and more broadly in this industry. So last but not least, on a meta level, when you get to that scale phase, you can start to use this same framework of startup growth and scale inside your own company. So your core business, like Purdue, your MFA, may be in scale mode, but you'll be having other parts of your business that might be in startup, moving to growth, or maybe you're planning some new seeds, some new product development, some new routes to market in that early startup mode. So you need to think about like the teams and the goals and the management systems that are appropriate for each of these initiatives within your organization. If you try to take your practices that work for the scale business and you apply them to the startup business, obviously things might not work well or might not get off the ground. That's why big companies struggle to adapt and innovate. But at the end of the day, you want a sort of portfolio of initiatives that kind of smooth out to an impressive growth rate. You've got your first S-curve from your core business that might starting to be, might be slowing, might be on the top of the S. But you want to have additional S-curves that are starting to kick in to kind of smooth out that growth. And if you can build that portfolio of growth, then you can build a really enduring company. So to wrap up, I hope there's a few lessons you can take forward to your startup, whether you're already scaling or whether you're just thinking about starting something. I think it's not an official Black Hat talk unless there's a quote from Halvar in it, so I had to look for some wise words in his Twitter feed. Offense is easy. We do a lot of it here in Black Hat, but it's somewhat ephemeral. And while building a product or a business or a team may also be hard, it's also the most fulfilling. There's no greater experience than starting a company. On the best days, you might feel like you're on top of the world. On the worst days, it's going to feel like the biggest gut punch you can imagine. And oftentimes, like those days are in like rapid succession. It's like up, down, up, down, up, down. But if you're that kind of person that has like a growth mindset that thrives on a little bit of chaos and change, then you'll absolutely love it. So my ask for everyone here today, for those of you that are going through that entrepreneurial journey, I'd ask you to keep a few things in mind here. This is a team sport. Building companies. We might be competing with each other, but like we're all trying to improve the state of the world in security. So, please pay it forward, give trust to others, and bring people together. For every introduction that you get, give an introduction to somebody else. For every hour of advice that you receive, give an hour of advice to somebody else. And every risk that someone takes on you, make sure to take a risk on somebody else. So appreciate you guys all coming and let me share some of these experiences. Thank you.